Welcome to the Online Entrepreneur Academy podcast, and Dr. Mark Deeks, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have you, and I think it's going to be a very exciting conversation, so thank you. Could I hand over to you to introduce yourself, please, to our audience?
Yeah, so my name's Mark Deeks. I'm a speaker and a performer, a musician, and a teacher. And the thread through all of that is music. I've been a musician all my life, from teaching piano since I was 15 to now being 47. So yeah, the thread is music through everything. It's the obsession, it's the job, it's the hobby, it's everything. And but my biggest passion is the connection between music and well-being and music and mental health and what music can do for us when we view it as more than entertainment. So yeah, that's what I do.
Fantastic. And that was going to be my first question. How does it come together? So I think you've covered that. Let's talk about your PhD.
We're starting there.
Let's start there, but we could go further back if you like.
Yeah, my PhD is called National Identity in Northern and Eastern European Heavy Metal Music. So it's yeah, rock and metal music is my biggest passion. But the whilst that's the sort of the hook that people say, oh, you've got a PhD in heavy metal, which is true. It's more an examination on how musicians represent where they're from in their music, and that can be through the lyrics or the subject matter of the lyrics they choose to write, be it about historical periods or using ancient mythologies or poetry. Sometimes bands will use old paintings on their front covers of particular landscapes, so there's already an identity sort of element in that. Sometimes bands take old folk music and use that as a starting point for songs. But in the last 40 years in heavy metal music, that whole area has become a huge, you could almost use the word trend really. I mean, it's been a huge explosion of bands from particularly across Europe, who've taken elements of where they're from and represented it in their music. And it's something that can be traced back to a lot of classical composers like Sibelius or Bartok or Wagner, or lots of composers who've taken elements of their region or their nation and use that as an inspiration for their music. So yeah, it's viewing it through that context.
Mm. Which gives a much deeper insight because, I put my hands up to being non-musical. I listen to music as most of us do. And when I've listened to younger people's music, sometimes I don't understand it. It sounds like noise. But then when you start to, as a pedestrian, when you start to listen more deeply, you hear different things. So is there something in the rhythms and, it's a non-musical question. I apologize for that. What attracts people to, and any music can be loud, but what attracts people to heavy metal? Is it that history you've just spoken about?
I mean, that's only one sort of area of heavy metal music. It's a huge genre and filled with a plethora of subgenres by this point. But I think that having got into rock music when I was a teenager, like many people do, that there's sort of I'm deeply familiar with the stereotypes that come with people who like this kind of music. And people assume that it's angry, it's just noise, that classic expression, it's aggressive and so on. And so I'm used to sort of having to have a wry smile and roll over my eyes on my face when people talk about that stuff. But it's fine because my sort of position is always that the world at large, be it through media or streaming platforms or TV or film, often positions different styles of music as being very stereotypical in different ways. So, you just have one of the examples I always give is if you imagine watching a TV drama and there's a crime being committed and there's music in the background, whilst the criminals do their naughty things. There's often rock music in the background or hip hop music in the background, because that's an easier button to press from a film creator's point of view, because that's what angry people listen to, which for someone such as myself is nonsense. But sometimes you see very posh criminals listening to classical music on vinyl. Because they're consideringly intelligently about to commit a crime. But no, I think that the world presents certain types of music as being relaxing and certain types of music as being aggressive. And what I talk about professionally is that that's very much not true. We happily accept that different people like different kinds of food, but when it comes to music, to suggest that 8 billion people all find the same kind of music relaxing is just ridiculous. But
Yeah.
if you use the term relaxing music as a search term in on internet browsers or in Apple Music or Spotify, then you just get lots of whale noise and sounds of nature, and you suddenly feel like you're in a spa. And of course,
Yes.
when I go to a spa, which is a sentence I don't say very often because it's very rare, but on the occasions where I have frequented such a thing, I find the music that they play in there to be intensely irritating, which is probably why I don't go very often.
Yeah.
Um, but if I was to offer most people the notion of relaxing to Iron Maiden, they would also find that ridiculous, and that's fine. My
Mm,
point is not that everyone should be relaxed by heavy metal music. That's just what relaxes me.
mm,
My point is to sort of challenge a little bit how we view music, and to be a bit more intentional and aware of how we react to different styles of music. And if you are relaxed by jazz and irritated by country, then great. But have that experiment, have that conversation with yourself, and be a bit more intentional about how you use music. And don't just search for relaxing music. Play what music you're told is relaxing by a search engine, and then just accept it to be so, because it's not true. And so yeah, that's kind of it's not that why are people relaxed by heavy metal? I can tell you why the people I know are relaxed by heavy metal. It tends to be they tend to talk about a cathartic kind of feeling in that whilst we sort of view relaxation as, we kind of have to establish what relaxation is first of all. Relaxation for some people is lying with their eyes closed in the middle of a forest or something.
mm,
Whereas for some people, having the pressure that is in their heads brought on by daily life or stress or mental health concerns or whatever it might be, having that released like a pressure valve in a sort of cathartic manner, that feels relaxing. And so
mm.
we might not be viewing relaxation as the same thing, but it's very much producing the same kind of after effect. Just to be clear, I don't come at this from any scientific background. I have no scientific or doctoral training other than having my PhD in heavy metal. Um, but having spent 30 years around this stuff, and
Mm,
also running countless projects where people interact with music for a hobby
mhm,
or on a professional basis, I've
mm.
heard enough stories to know and seen enough research to know that different people react to different musics in different ways. But we try to box everyone in as being relaxed by A and wound up by B, and it's just silly.
Yeah. And you put it so clearly, it doesn't make any sense because we are all different. If I'm feeling pressure, I go for a long bike ride. Most people think I'm mad, but we're all
Exactly.
totally different. And it's a really, really good point for our listeners to take hold of. And don't be afraid to like what we like and what works for us. Put it very.
Exactly that.
So how does music help us maintain our health? Is it, as you just said, the relieving the pressure points? Are there other deeper things there that perhaps the average person isn't aware of?
Well, I think it's a mindset first of all, and so I think that I'll often be quoted as saying I think music is the most underutilized well-being tool we have, and what I mean by that is we're very much used to in modern day and age as well-being has become a subject that many people are more comfortable with discussing. They think of physical exercise, going to a gym, going for a walk, getting out in nature, and all these kind of things. All very well and good. Nothing wrong with any of those things, clearly. Um, they think about things like yoga or breathing exercises. Once again, nothing wrong with those whatsoever. But that tends to be where most people stop. And the reason that I sort of challenge people to start thinking about music in the same way, that's the key thing, to frame music as having the potential to do the same thing as all those things I just listed.
Mm,
And the reason that I frame it in that way is that um, when you try to learn a new yoga move or breathing exercise or journaling or whatever it might be, the person who's explaining that to you needs to kind of explain what it is first before you can start to reap any benefits. Whereas with music, you already know what it is. You already have a relationship with music. I don't need to explain a new thing to you. I don't need to explain any new concepts to you. I don't need to start telling you what music is before I can tell you how to use it as a well-being tool. I can just say to you, what music puts a smile on your face? There you go. And you smiled straight away. And so
mm,
because you smiled straight away, you already know the answer to that question. And it might be a particular track, a particular artist, a particular composer, a particular style of music. It doesn't make any difference. The point is, have you ever considered that your interaction with, or lack of interaction with, that music, whatever that music was, could be affecting your mental health? And if the answer is, well, I'm busy and, I put music on in the background while I study. This is one of the other things I say to people. If you're the kind of person who saves playlists on any kind of platforms, Spotify or whatever, look at how you've named your playlists. And very commonly you will have named your playlist with an activity in it. This is my running playlist. This is my cooking playlist. This is my study playlist. This is my work. Which just shows me that the music isn't the thing you're doing. The music is the background to the thing you're doing. You've just attached some music to the thing you're going to do. You're not actually just listening to the music. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't do that. Of course, that's absolutely fine. Some people study better if they've got X style of music on. Fine. But my question to you is, when was the last time you created a playlist that was just an intentional playlist? And what I mean by that is songs that make me smile. That's an intentional playlist. Songs that remind me of someone I love. That's an intentional playlist, because memories are powerful. And if you start connecting songs to memories, which of course everyone listening has a memory that has a song as part of it. That time that we had that dance at that silly place we went to, that karaoke bar, that song we had at our wedding, that song so-and-so had at their funeral. That songs become entrenched in memories. Why are they not batched together in a playlist so that when you feel mood X and want to feel mood Y, you have them at your disposal? And that's a 5-minute job. I've done that with countless people. I say, get your phone out, get a playlist called Songs That Make Me Smile, and put 3 songs on it, put 5 songs on it, put 10 songs on it, put 1 song on it. But the next time you wake up feeling sad or depressed or stressed or anxious, like we all do from time to time, it's ready to roll. And that is such a simple thing to do.
Fabulous advice. And it's one of those things, when you say it, it makes so much sense. And I'm just thinking, why didn't I think of that before?
Yeah, I mean, it's a common response. And, it's not like I'm sat here with some kind of genius approach to music. It's just having spent so many years around so many people who have a relationship with music and observe what they get out of it. Because I've run community choirs for 25 years. I've taught piano for 30 years. And all of those people who do those things have chosen a musical hobby. So then the question is, well, why have they chosen a musical hobby? And if you ask them, 8 or 9 times out of 10, the first reason they give you is nothing to do with music. It's to do with the role that it's playing in their life. And they've chosen a musical thing to do that. So, for example, I could say to my choir, why have you joined the community choir? And they will say things like, it gets me out of the house. Or, I'm stressed at work, I need some time just for me. Or, my family life's a bit pressured, I need some time, a week there where I can just switch off from work and the kids. Or they'll say things like, I'm using it to build my confidence. Or someone said to me at school, I'll never be musical, and I thought I would never be able to stand on stage and sing. Whatever it might be, the reasons are often not, I like the music. That's often second. It's what it's doing for them, the role that it's giving them. The people who are learning to play the piano in the 70s. Why? Oh, well, I want to keep my fingers nimble. Or I've been worried about, I've heard learning a new skill at older age can be good for my sort of brain matter or whatever. You can tell I'm not a scientist. So the people say these things, and that's why they're doing it. They've just chosen music, whereas other people might choose, like you said, I want to go on a bike ride, or I want to, take up knitting, like whatever it is. But the people who choose music, they're doing it to fulfill a role in their life. The fact that they like the music is a bonus.
Well, that makes huge sense again. Now, I saw on your LinkedIn mental health in the music industry. So you were talking to young students this week, were you?
I used to work at New College Durham many years ago. I'm actually going to speak at Middlesbrough College. So my background is I did 9 years in further education at New College Durham as a lecturer and running the courses there. So next Tuesday, in a couple of days' time, I'm going to speak at Middlesbrough College, and it's part of sort of a cultural studies kind of aspect of their degree course. That they should have some content with a mental health kind of outlook, and of course we hear a lot of stories around musicians struggling with mental health issues. I have countless musicians that I know have and continue to do so, and we see people far more high profile than I, who've had struggles and sadly lost those struggles. It's a conversation that the music industry, like I guess a lot of other industries, can be very much full of bravado and
Mm.
performance, and it's very easy to go into performance mode when you leave the house. And I certainly find that with the bands that I'm part of, if we're on tour or we're playing festivals or whatever, and people will say, "Oh wow, you look like you're having an amazing time," or they come up and talk to you and ask for a picture or an autograph, and you think there's a perception that you've got it made
Mhm.
because you're in the band. And the reality of the situation is that it's very, very hard being a musician. You know, e- certainly the level I'm at, we are, quote unquote famous, but at a minuscule level,
Mm.
nothing like, some of the other high profile names you see in the news. And even at our level, it can be really difficult to, get up on stage and give it some welly for an hour. Even though it's really fun and it's a fantastic thing to do. But the 23 hours that you've been waiting to do that all day can be an utter slog. And you're away from your family and you're away from your kid. I've got a daughter and my wife, and it's not an easy thing to do. And we are rarely away from home for more than like a week at a time. Whereas
Right.
some bands are away for months on end,
Yeah,
and that
constantly.
is it's a real challenge mentally.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Waking up in different cities all over the world and hotel rooms and then a
Yeah,
stage and moving on.
well,
Yeah.
hotel rooms if you're lucky.
Caravans.
Buses, vans.
Yes. Absolutely. Which some way maybe makes the local pub circuit for good local bands quite an attractive one. Pack up
Yeah,
your
back to your home, back to your bed.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you mentioned teaching, and this is very interesting because I'm still in teaching FE myself as well, but a lot of teachers want to use their skills in different ways and branch out. So what advice or how can we help people? Perhaps to be clear, perhaps people want to stay doing what they do in their day job, but they also want to do something else. Is there a way to explore that you would recommend?
So from a point of view of being a teacher and doing other things, or in
Yeah,
any industry.
I'm particularly thinking of teachers. A lot of people be frightened to take that first move or to invest the time to do that.
I mean,
Is
I often joke that I did the traditional musician's career in reverse. So the traditional musician's career is try and become in a famous band when you're 20,
right.
then realize it's an absolute slog, then become a teacher. Because many musicians can not only be in a classroom teaching music, they can teach their instruments, one to one, etc., privately. And there are many people for whom that's a considerable part, if not an entire part of their income, for years, forever. Um, I think that what's weird is I joined the band that I guess I'm sort of most well known for, a band called Winterfylleth, 10 years ago. So I was like 36, 37 at that point. And I'd already done um, like 9 years as a college lecturer. I'd had a career to all
Mhm.
intents and purposes. But whilst being a teacher and being a musician kind of lends itself to this, there are 20 different ways you can earn a bit of income, and it's the term working musician gets used a lot. So whilst I was a teacher and a lecturer, I was still a working musician on the side. I would still, play for choirs on the night time, run choirs, run singing groups, do arrangements for
Mhm.
musical work as a musical director, and so on. So for me, the thing that sadly drove me out of teaching was I didn't feel that the education sector that I was working in at the time was um, structured in a way that would value people who had the job skills that I had, because education, for right or for wrong, and we can get into a deep political debate if we want, but I doubt that we do. Education, for me personally, has become weighted too heavily in favor of quality departments and statistics and data and spreadsheets, and not heavily enough in the direction of actual people on the ground who know how to do the thing and know how to teach and know how to establish a relationship with students and know how to get results out of them. And
Mhm.
so I felt that the constant goalpost moving of quality boards and examination boards, and or now we're deciding this is the emphasis this year. Oh, by the way, can you just put this pie chart in your file for Ofsted kind of stuff? That became an absolute mountain that I just couldn't face. When in reality, I knew that if I was left alone with a class full of students and some instruments, and
Mm.
you came back in 9 months' time, they'd be much better musicians than when they got there, and I wouldn't have had to think about all this other stuff that went with it. But it's not like I don't get the point of data and quality. I get it, but certainly in the context of music, it's a bit more of a intangible, soft thing to measure. It doesn't always fit into a black and white box spreadsheet with color coded like value added data on it. So I think that for people who are currently working in education, but of course the traditional FE structure in this country is people who had a skill. The people
Yeah.
who were lecturers traditionally were people who had worked in jobs like building or cars or electricians or whatever.
Mm.
They had a traditional sort of industry skill, and they now, having done that for 10, 15, 20 years, were becoming lecturers. But of course, the FE was the sort of black sheep in the education structure, wasn't it? Because
Yeah.
in HE and in schools, you needed to have a teaching qualification. And the emphasis was on, are you a teacher? But FE was the one where could you do the skill? But there's obviously been a move towards that. Now all sectors, the emphasis on, do you have a teaching qualification, etc., etc. So I think that sometimes, for me, I know that there are people still working in education in music who are working musicians on the side, as it were. And every time I say to them, most of them just look browbeaten, like they've lost the spark of why they had the skill in the first place, what the skill brings them. And of course,
Mm.
because I so deeply talk about, the soul element of why you would be a musician, for example, that just seems such a shame because I know they're great musicians and I know they're great teachers, but they look
Yeah.
knackered all of the time.
Beaten down by bureaucracy. Yeah.
So I just want people to remember why you're doing it in the first place and see if you can put a little bit of that back into your life away from the day job.
Mm. Absolutely. And as you say, as you suggested, perhaps that applies in lots of areas. Why are we doing what we're doing? Can we change it up? Look at it from a different point of view.
I mean, I decided to get out over 12 years ago. I've been fully out of education for 12 years now, so I couldn't even go back if I wanted to at this point. And not that I would want to.
Yeah.
And my sort of transition was, could I try to match my teaching salary at the same time as being a teaching? So I was still in full-time teaching,
Mhm.
and I tried to increase my working musician money for
Yeah.
a year. So basically, I would make double income for a year, but I would obviously be utterly knackered. I didn't have a wife and family at that time, and I sort of just grafted my way through it. And then I decided if I could get within 5 grand of my teaching salary, I would consider it a price worth paying to get rid of the stress.
Yeah.
So
Really is.
I did a sort of transition of doing both at the same time for a year, and then said see
Yeah.
you later.
And that's a reassuring way to do it, is not people not to jump ship, so to speak, and then have other issues, financial issues.
Yeah.
They're very practical. Moving to mental health, tell us a little bit about your work on that and how we can perhaps every day make a difference. Yeah, let me hand over to you. I phrased that very badly, but it's a huge issue.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. I don't have any training in this other than having done the mental health first aid qualification a few years ago. This is not my area of specialism, but I have lived experience of what it's like to try and deal with mental health issues.
Mm.
And for me, it had been late 30s, occasional periods of lowness, not really knowing why they were. I'd just sort of wake up one day, feel a bit, quote unquote depressed, not really know why, and it had gone by the next day. And it's sort of this unknown, and it wasn't happening all the time. So it's just life, isn't it? You crack on.
Yeah.
But they would sort of get a little bit more frequent, and then we had like a major trauma 4.5 years ago when myself and my wife we lost our first daughter mid-pregnancy, and that was what's called a termination for medical reasons, which is known as a TFMR. And it's a thing that obviously most people don't know about. We didn't know about till we sat in the consultant's room, and it basically means that you at the 20-week scan or at any other stage, but for us it was the 20-week scan. The medical diagnosis is utterly bleak, and your child has given like well, they don't put it in percentages, but basically for us, it was two terminal conditions, one of which was dangerous to my wife. This is the situation. And legally, the difficulty is it's the parent's choice of what to do. And so you're not told this is happening. This is like, would you like to sign this piece of paper and we go ahead kind of thing. And so you can decide to take your chances or take the advice, but legally it's your call. And that comes sort of loaded with all kinds of stress and guilt and so on. So yeah, we did the TFMR, and it's, well, it was 10 days later, everyone was in lockdown. So that's the time period we were in. So we're then sort of trying to deal with that kind of situation on our own. And we sort of, I mean, my wife couldn't work because of the industry she was working in. So she was just rattling around the house going on never-ending dog walks. And I was trying to make my business work online. And thankfully, some of it already did, but not all of it. And so I was working frantically to try and pay the bills, and so never really processed what was going on, even though I kind of thought that I had. And then within about 6 months, I was having like raging panic attacks, and it sort of caught up with me. And I was at the time I was writing an album for my solo project, which is called Arth, which is an old Northumbrian word, which means my native land. And my albums tell sort of the story of Northumberland history set to melodic doom metal, which makes it as ridiculously niche as it sounds. Yeah, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law had a star named after our daughter who we'd lost, who we'd named Laurie. And so we didn't know about this ornate star chart arrived in the post with the coordinates of where the Laurie Deeks star is in the Andromeda system, which is obviously really, really beautiful. And so that's what the numbers are on my tattoo. That's the coordinates of the star. Yeah, I just knew that music needed to be part of how I was going to pull myself out of it, but I couldn't really figure out how to do it. I didn't want to write a song about it because that's just felt really crass. And I was writing this album about, a 7th century Northumbrian saint, so that would have been a bit out of place. So I literally sat up in bed 3 o'clock one morning and thought, what if those numbers aren't star coordinates? What if they're the notes of a musical scale? What does it sound like as a melody? Let's play the star coordinates. And so that melody, I went for a run the next morning, and I was just like looping the melody around in my head, working out chords that could go underneath it as I was running. And that melody goes at the end of the first Arth album on a track which, as I say, has absolutely nothing to do with it. It's about St. Cuthbert. And if you don't know it's there, you don't know it's there. And I only ever sort of talk about it if people sort of ask me about it. But to me, that to the rest of the world, that's a song called "Only Three Shall Know," and in our house, that's Laurie's theme. So it was a really sort of cathartic moment, which allowed me to sort of try and process what we were going through, and most importantly, because we'd never met her, it was almost like she never existed. But because now I thought I had this proof that if she'd never existed, this melody would never have existed. So obviously she must have existed. And it was like the first stage of sort of trying to make something positive come out of it. And that's what sort of started me, leading me down the path of, the more I spoke about it, the more I realized that men don't speak about this stuff.
Yeah.
The more time I spent around the baby loss community, as it's known, the more sort of awkward shuffling men I saw behind their partners stood at events. Men generally don't talk about mental health problems, and this is not just a men problem, by the way. How many times have we heard women speak about the children that they've lost? And the answer is very rarely. And then you can assume that men are far less. But when you spend any time around these communities, you realize just how many millions of pregnancies don't succeed. And it's extraordinarily, it's numbers that you can't begin to process. Like sometimes we go to these events and they'll read out the names of children who've been lost, and some families have got 5 children. How do you even get one foot in front of the other on a morning? And we went through it once, and it's brutal. And so it makes you wonder how anyone is successfully born, and yet we know we've got 8 billion people we seem to be able to pull it off. But that's how significant a thing it is, and yet nobody talks about it.
No,
And
it's
so, and it's because it's the most awkward of conversations. Like, what do you say to anyone who's gone through that? The answer is none of us know.
no.
So I just decided that the way I was going to process it was to keep talking about it, because if I didn't try and make something positive come out of it, I was going to go stir crazy. And
Mm.
so, that's led me to now speaking professionally about how music got me through. It led me through to my TEDx a year ago about could heavy metal music help maintain your mental health? But of course, the messages, it can be any music. And you don't need to be able to turn star coordinates into music. This is just, how can music help us get through the hardest times? And have we framed music before as this kind of potential well-being tool? And the answer is, if you haven't, it probably can help.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I listened to your TEDx talk, and
Thank you.
we'll put it in the show notes along with the links to the band as well. So how did you get to do the TEDx talk? Did they approach you? How does one do that? I think our audience would love to know, how do you get a TEDx talk?
Well, I didn't realize how big a deal this was until I'd done it. So only by finding out the fact that in different regions, the process is very different. So there's a
Interesting.
bit of a postcode lottery going on because, of course, they're independently organized events. That's what TEDx events are, as opposed to the main TED events. So what my experience is not therefore going to be the same as in other regions. I know in some regions there are huge hoops to be jumped through in terms of like audition processes and getting through to the next stage kind of thing. My process was, somebody I know recommended me, and that it wasn't a sealed deal at that point, but it got me sort of a meeting with the organizer, and literally a coffee, and discussing how this could go and what it might look like, and some revisions and so on. And I mean, it wasn't immediate though. It took about 18 months. And they asked me to run what they call a TEDx experience first, which is workshops that some organizations run the day before the main TEDx event. So I ran a TEDx experience workshop the first year, and then the next year I did the TEDx talk, which a couple of days ago was the first anniversary of.
Postcode lottery, and if you're listening in another country, research your own area, I guess, because
Yeah, I mean, relationships are relationships. It's networking, isn't it? If you can establish relationships with the people who organize a local TEDx, then that obviously can't do any harm. But there needs to be some value and I think soul. I think the best TEDx talks are the ones that have got a bit of humanity about them. The
yeah,
stories that people are going to remember. That old cliche about people remembering how you made them feel.
yeah.
That's definitely the response that I got from mine. And don't be afraid to do something a little bit different. I don't talk for the first minute or two of my talks. I play piano. I
Yeah.
put a question on the screen.
And when I was listening to your TEDx talk, it just went so quickly because it was the feeling and the variety, good classroom skills, really, at the end of
Thank you.
the go back to
Many hours stood in front of classes.
variety of different people. So how do we engage young people in what they're doing? A lot of young people are disengaged, disinterested in what they're doing. There's no one thing fits all, but any insights?
Oh, deep. Let's just fix the youth. I think it's the same with adults, by the way. I don't think it's just a kids thing. I think there's a general malaise post-pandemic.
Yeah.
So I've seen that in the events and the choirs and the concerts that I run. There is a general drop-off in terms of attendances, in terms of like general sort of commitment. Certainly in the events and music industry and the gigging of bands, there's a lot of promoters who talk about. There's been lots of problems over the last few years of people making last-minute decisions to attend events.
Mm.
So whereas the events industry is often sort of very reliant on pre-sales
Mhm.
for events to go ahead. If 20 people have said they're coming to a 200 capacity show, and by like a week to go, then you're running the risk of events being cancelled last minute,
Mhm.
even though that 120 people are going to turn up on the door. This kind of stuff is happening all the time, and promoters are having the sort of stresses of making calls at the last minute and just going on gut feel a lot. So it's not just a malaise in sort of youth and education. I think we are suffering a hangover from the pandemic, that people got comfortable being in their houses and people got less risk ready. They just it's got too easy. Obviously, it wasn't an easy situation, of course, but do you know what I mean? It got too easy to just go, well, we'll just get a blanket and watch the telly.
Yeah.
And I think people got used to being in the safety. There was an element of like feeling safe at home kind of thing. I think that's had, in my very completely untrained mental health,
Mm.
psychological kind of background, with no knowledge of that whatsoever, that's what the feel is. Like people got comfortable being with those closest to them at home, and so that's now manifesting itself in. It depends what kind of person you are. Some people are like champing at the bit to now experience life at 100 miles an hour and taking every experience they can get their hands on, and some people are just, nah, I'll just stay in tonight,
Yeah.
and it's a shame. So, I think what the way out of that is, I don't know, but for me, whether it's young people or not, it's reminding people to sort of. I've always been a big fan of gut feel and soul. Like, what is it that lights you up? Like, where is the passion?
Mhm.
And you have to try new things to find that. But if you try something and don't like it, then that's fine. But what is it that absolutely lights you up? What is that thing? Because there is something.
Mm.
And then like hunt it down. Like life is way too short for us to just go, I think I'll stay in tonight forever. And don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, I can be a grumpy middle-aged man when I want to be.
Snap me too, but well, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that is such an important message. It is such an important message. Do something that you feel passionate about. Don't just be a passenger. If you have choices, I totally respect that a lot of people in our world don't have choices. It's
And don't be afraid for it to not be the thing that people expect you to do. And not
mm,
be the thing that people think you should do. Like that word is a killer.
oh, should yes,
Because I'm
absolutely.
like 30 years ago, my mum had people saying to her, "Are you really going to let him study music?
Yeah,
Like, should he not, get a proper job?" That kind of vibe.
yeah, absolutely.
Particularly, I'm from the northeast of England. There was always this sort of traditional idea that you had to go to London. The path to London was paved with gold at the other end of the country, and if you didn't go to London, you were knackered. And I'm a northeast working class area. Or surely there's no career in music for someone such as myself. And I've earned every penny from music. But um, yeah, don't feel like you have to do what is expected of you. And
Mm,
even like it might not be a very great thing to say to someone with an interest in education, but that if I was now, I've been out of education for 12 years. If I was now doing what I did 12 years ago and like running the second year of an FE course, getting people ready for university, like UCAS applications, and should you go into university, I'm not sure I'd be telling everyone to do it.
mm.
I think there is less value in that. Not less value, but
It's
it's a less black and white situation than it used to be.
I totally agree, and personally, I'm passionate about is university really for you? Is it the best choice? And if it is, great, but there are other choices and passion. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So changing things very slightly, bands, and I'm looking down at my notes here. Funny or unexpected stories to share on the road? We need to,
I mean, some on for public consumption, but
yeah, ones that we've got some time.
oh, I mean, yeah, silly things happen all the time, but you know, to most people, they'd be like, "Why is he laughing at that?" But being in a band is very much of an environment of in jokes and
Mm.
daft things which no one else understands. But I mean, I'll give you one that happened recently, but most people probably won't understand why we were so entertained by this.
I'll
But
go for it.
the sort of the classic perception of a band and their rider and what bands will ask for backstage is obviously the sort of stereotypical media led. I want all the M&Ms, but I want you to take the blue ones out, kind of thing,
Yes.
and sort of ridiculous demands. And of course, at our level, we are not in any position to start throwing around ridiculous demands like that. But just for fun, a few years ago, we put on our rider that we wanted a particular photograph of a particular drummer from a particular album back cover framed in our dressing room. And of course, in reality, it just takes someone to like screenshot something off the internet, go to a local photo shop, spend £8 on some wooden frame and put it in,
And you,
and we're greatly entertained. I won't bore you with the story of who it is or why, but anyway, we thought that we put this on our rider basically as a way to see if anyone was watching or paying
yeah,
attention.
yeah.
And it was a very simple thing for them to do to show that we were cared for. But and 75 to 85% of promoters completely ignore it, and it just never appears. But every now and then, someone will actually do it. And so we don't, when we walk into the venue and there's a framed photo, he's called Bill Andrews. Every time we walk into a dressing room and suddenly there's a photo of Bill Andrews, we all sort of laugh, and it's fun. But there was a promoter recently who had it put on a cake.
Oh,
And that was extremely good bonus points, because now not only did we have a photo of Bill Andrews, but it was on a cake, which we were allowed to eat. So that was
oh, excellent. Yeah, I'm sure there are many of that. Oh, incredible. And before we started recording this podcast, you were talking about your local areas. So tell us a little about Lindisfarne, because if you're listening in other parts of the world and you're coming to the UK, don't ignore the north of England. And going back to what you said just a little bit, when I chose to go to Sheffield University, living in the south, people say, "Oh, why are you going north?" Well, it's actually not even north. So
well, yeah.
we're a beautiful country here in the UK. So over to you. Tell us a
Yeah, I
little.
mean, Sheffield's about 2.5 hours south of me, but
Well, to a southern, apparently it's north. That's
oh
hilarious.
yeah, so I understand that. I'm very used to people thinking in Liverpool and stuff, which is hilarious. But anyway, yeah, I'm in the northeast of England, right in the northeast corner. So my nearest city where I'm from is Newcastle upon Tyne. But even then, there's still an hour and a half to go north to the Scottish border. So Lindisfarne's a long way up, even from me, about an hour's or so's drive. So it's an island that's cut off by the tide twice a day. Its nearest town is a place called Bamburgh, where there's an extraordinary castle that's been used in various films, right on the beach. And sort of seeing a massive, imposing Norman castle right on a sand beach is quite a sight. And then it looks over to a place called Lindisfarne, or Holy Island. And it's known as that because it was a base for some monks from around the 7th century or so. And it's an area that is very, very important in the sort of bringing of Christianity to England. It's also the island that the Vikings first invaded that was their first sort of landing point when the Vikings invaded England in 793. So it's an area steeped in history, and I think that it's a sadly untapped area in terms of like a lot of tourists. Like, you have to kind of make a little bit of an effort to get to it. But when you do, it's miles and miles and miles of luscious green countryside and beautiful countryside with sandy beaches with lots of castles. And it just looks like a sort of historical area, because it is. Um, and so, yeah, it's a bit harder to get to than London, but then it looks much nicer.
So much worth the effort. And you've got an event going on there next year, haven't you?
Yeah, so my sort of passion for music and well-being has led me to stage my first. I didn't want to call it a retreat, so I called it a getaway. So it's called Breathe, the Musical Wellbeing Getaway, and it's 2 days of events on Holy Island for just 32 people, which as of about an hour ago has only 4 spaces left. And the idea is that myself and 3 or 4 other sort of practitioners are going to run a series of workshops and sessions, and all with an aspect of using music as a wellbeing tool. So I'll be running some like singing sessions. I've got a vocal health specialist, a sound bath specialist, a music meditation specialist. My wife's going to be doing holistic facials, because that's something that she does professionally as well. And there's going to be a concert in the old church on the island. We're having a private tasting session from the brewery on the island, which is where Lindisfarne mead is made, a sort of internationally well-known brand of mead, because that's where it was traditionally made, from the 700s. So yeah, it's 2 days of sessions, really encouraging a group of people to think of music and their relationship with music in the context of well-being.
And at the time, if people are listening to the podcast, this may have filled up. So if you're listening to it as we first publish, click on that button, which we'll put in the show
Oh,
notes.
thank you.
Because not many places left, are there? You said, how many did you say?
4 spaces left, yeah. And it's not, the event is not for another 10 months. So
Mm,
yeah.
absolutely amazing. So at the end of my conversations, I always ask people 4 questions, and
Okay.
it's you'll recognise it as I've got the idea from our own BBC Radio 4. So you're on an island, could even be Lindisfarne, and you can take one item of food with you. You've got your sea with your fish, you've got your fruit from the trees. What luxury or what food would you take with you?
I mean, my absolute favorite food is lasagna. It's just, I don't know. I don't know why. I just love lasagna. I'll eat lasagna at any excuse.
Fair enough, that's good. Now, in terms of books, you've got Faith book of your choice, you've got Shakespeare. What other book would you take?
Oh my goodness, I'm not really a book reader, and that might sound. I don't remember the last book that I actually finished. I tend to, if I'm going to read, I tend to read biographies of bands and like histories of genres and stuff because I'm just such a music obsessive. But my problem is I fall asleep immediately I start reading. So it takes me so long to get to the end of a book. I've lost
What-
interest, and the next thing I know, I'm 20 pages into another book, kind of thing. So, um, yeah, I don't have a specific book, but it would definitely be a biography of some musician. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Let's have that. And obviously, I'm going to ask you about music, but first of all, what luxury would you take?
What luxury?
Luxury that you would consider a luxury.
I don't know. What do I consider a luxury? Um, are my wife and daughter going to be there? Or is it just me? We need
It's just like your
clarification.
immediate family there, yeah, your
Oh, the
immediate.
family are there, right? Okay.
Bit unfair otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, Werther's original sweets are like my absolute addiction. I, there's not enough butterscotch in the world. That's my general
Yeah.
policy.
I can relate to that, absolutely. And now this is going to be looking at the background there with all those albums and records. One musical track.
Oh, one song.
One. Sorry, I was
I mean, where do you even begin with such a conversation? Like, I have difficulty narrowing it down to like top 100 artists. Never mind
yeah,
one song. I mean, I think. I mean, I could just reel them off, but I'm gonna go today. I'm gonna go for "The Evil That Men Do" by Iron Maiden.
Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Any
No
final
problem.
words for our audience?
No, I mean, just I hope this has given people something to think about. Take 2 minutes to create a playlist called "Songs That Make Me Smile," and then the next time you feel low, there it goes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much indeed.